unceded and traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. I invite all of you to introduce yourselves and acknowledge the lands that you are attending from in the Whova chat. It's great to see, thank you. For greater accessibility, we have both American Sign Language interpretation, as well as communication access real-time translation services provided today. To access the closed captioning on your desktop, click on the CC or Live Transcript button on the Zoom menu to the right of the chat button. In the mobile app, click the More button on the control menu. The font size can be adjusted by going to your setting in the Zoom app and choosing Accessibility at the bottom. I want to take this moment to pay tribute to all the amazing women, non-binary, two-spirit, and transgender tradespeople, our industry partners, advocates, and allies, and our generous sponsors for making this conference possible. We're here today thanks to your hard work and unrelenting support, and for that we are truly grateful. I'm happy about our next session, where we get to hear from several of our fantastic allies about their vision for the future of equity and inclusion in the skilled trades industry, from their experiences and perspectives as industry representatives. Moderating this session is Sussanne Skidmore, Secretary-Treasurer of the BC Federation of Labour. Sussanne has consistently been a vocal supporter of underrepresented groups in trades in general, and of the BC Centre for Women in the Trades specifically, for many years, and we're indebted to her for her willingness to go above and beyond to move the conversation around equity and inclusion. We are hoping to leave time for the panel to answer a few questions at the end, so please put your questions in the question and answer in Whova. If someone has already asked the question you want to ask, vote for the question to raise its priority in the queue. Don't forget that you get points for engagement to win prizes. There's an iPad and $500 gift cards for new trades gear up for grabs. If you're just joining us, please note that you can access the closed captioning on your desktop. Click on the CC or Live Transcript button on the Zoom menu to the right of the chat button. In the mobile app, click the More button on the control menu. The font size can be adjusted by going to Setting in your Zoom app and choosing Accessibility at the bottom. And with that, over to you, Sussanne.
Thank you. Monday morning, my coffee clearly hasn't kicked in yet. And so just want to thank Karen and welcome her to the team. We're really looking forward at the BC Federation of Labour having her on board. And I do want to acknowledge the land that I'm on. I'm joining you from the unceded traditional territories of the Secwepemc people here in the Shuswap. And I want to acknowledge that I'm a settler here joining you today. And I have this amazing group of panelists that I'm going to let them introduce themselves, because who better than themselves to let you know what they're up to in the world. And I just want to do a big shout out to all the staff at the BC Centre for Women in Trades and all the tradeswomen, governance committee folks who've been like working behind the scenes like mad to get this thing done and make this conference such a huge success. And I know it's been a lot of work, but it's been amazing. I've seen some great panels over the last few weeks. So we're going to start out with Cindy. Cindy, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're on this panel today.
Thank you, Sussanne, and good morning. My name is Cindy Oliver, and I am chair of the Industry Training Authority of BC. Prior to that, I was the president of the Federation of Post-Secondary Educators in British Columbia, and before that, I was an instructor at College of the Rockies in beautiful Fernie, BC. And I'm coming to you today from Burnaby, from the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. My professional career was spent mostly in public sector, as I indicated, and I spent my career helping and promoting women in their educational path. And this panel that we're on today, it's an honor for me to be here, so thank you for that. And I think it's timely, and it's something that is that we need to talk about, obviously, but also I'm excited to be learning from the rest of the panel and from the attendees who are most likely already punching in some questions. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for the invitation.
Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Okay, well, my Anishinaabe name is Nino Cassie, which means hummingbird. I'm known as Brenda Ireland, and my pronouns are she, her. I begin by expressing my gratitude for having the great privilege of living, working, playing on the unceded, beautiful traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam. And I honor that gratitude and reconciliation by making a commitment to continue my work to support equitable participation of Indigenous people in employment and the economy. I've been working in diversity and equity and inclusion for a very long time. I've completed reports on Indigenous skills development and education from preschool to post-secondary studies for the Canadian Council on Learning. I was seconded to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where I was the lead on photo acquisition and development of the learning tent for the national events. And I also drafted 2 papers for the TRC, one on the history of Indigenous people in Canada, as well as Indigenous participation in the workforce. I was the advisor for Indigenous skills and employment development for the province's LNG working group, later to be known as the Workforce Development Group. And I'm the senior advisor, Indigenous Relations at BCIT. But I think one of the things that I am most proud of is developing over 25 years an Indigenous awareness workshop titled History Matters, Indigenous Cultural Competency and Reconciliation in the Workplace. And this workshop was developed in partnership with my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Paulette Regan. For those of you who know her, she wrote Unsettling the Settler Within, Indian Residential Schools, Truth Telling and Reconciliation in Canada. She was the research director at the TRC and drafted the reconciliation volume and the 94 calls to actions. And I'm very proud not only of her work as an ally, but the work that we've done together. And History Matters is now a key component of BCIB's mandatory on-site initiative training, which is delivered to all employees on our sites. So Miigwech, thank you. I'm so honored to be part of this very illustrious group. Thank you.
Great to have you here. Ken now.
Good morning, everyone. Between Cindy and Brenda, that's a tough act to follow. I'm the president and CEO of the Construction Labor Relations Association of BC, or CLR, which is an organization that represents construction employers in BC that for over 52 years have employed unionized trades. Our objective has always been to work with our union partners to bring labor relations stability and security to BC's unionized construction sector. And in addition to all of that, I won't go through my whole resume, but I am a proud member of the BC Center for Women in Trades Governance Committee, representing the employer community and making the commitment necessary to advance women and other underrepresented groups in the construction sector at a time when not only it's, I mean, quite frankly, it's the right thing to do, but from an economic perspective, we need more and more people in the construction sector. And this is a largely untapped group that we need to bring into the industry. And I also will say I am coming to you from the Coquitlam First Nation territory and proud to be here.
Thanks, Ken. Brynne.
Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Brynne Bourke. I'm the interim executive director for the BC Building Trades Council. We're a council of 25 construction unions representing about 40,000 construction workers across BC. I am joining you today from New Westminster, the Kakite traditional territory. And I'm so pleased to be here today. This is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about, and it's one that I've been working on for a number of years. The Building Trades founded Build Together, which is the Women in Trades group for our members, so that women members could come together and advocate and support each other. So it's wonderful to join you, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
And last but certainly not least, Guy.
Thanks, Suzanne, and welcome and good morning, everybody. I'm broadcasting here from the downstairs studio in the traditional and unceded territory of the Stoneynaws Nation in Nanoose Bay. And I'm very honored to be here today. So thanks to the organizers for all the effort they've put in. And I look forward to hearing a lot of perspectives around the topic. So a bit of my background, quite a generalist, one would say. I grew up on Vancouver Island, so traditional Vancouver Island careers in the 70s, working on fishing boats and in the sawmills. Went on to take a carpentry program, pre-apprentice carpentry. The outlook for employment back in the day is not like today. And so not being able to get a job in carpentry, went on to study operations management at BCIT, moved into a career in manufacturing. And then later on came back and did some work in residential construction. And then after about 20 years in industry, then I kind of had an opportunity to join the post-secondary field. And that's where I joined BCIT, what was originally the School of Manufacturing, and spent a fair bit of time there in a couple of roles, as well as a Dean for Trades and Technology at Vancouver Island University. So I've been in a couple of the post-secondaries in the system that are heavily involved in trades. So currently I'm the Dean for the School of Transportation at BCIT, as well as the President and CEO for Trades Training BC, which is the consortium of the 15 public post-secondary schools and institutes that do trades training in the province. So again, very glad to be here today, and I look forward to learning.
What a great panel. I'm really excited to hear from you all. We know that there's been a lot of work done to try and shift the culture, make the workplace safer for women, trans, non-binary, racialized workers, and so many others. And there's been a lot of work, we know that, and there's so much more to do. And so I guess my first question for you, and I have 3 questions, and then we'll open it up to the folks that are on the Whova app. So don't forget to get your questions in for us. We'd love to ask these folks more questions. But I start out around culture shift. And so on culture shift, recognizing that there's still incredibly profound barriers for women, trans and non-binary folks entering the field of trades. Why do we have to have that culture shift, I guess is my question. We know that just adding more women to the worksite, although that is one of the steps that needs to happen, that's not enough. So can we talk a little bit from your perspectives about some solutions that you either have contemplated or some of the things that you think we should continue to work on? And I'm going to start this time with Brenda.
Going back to, I think it was Ken said it's the right thing to do, but also it makes business sense. Racism, any level discrimination has a major impact on driving people of equity groups, women out of the trades, and that affects the bottom line. And it's so when we're at a point where we need to be recruiting into the trades, we have an onus. It is our responsibility to ensure that every person that we recruit into these workplaces is going to be coming into a welcome, respectful workplace. And they're not going to go home at the end of the day and wonder if it's really worthwhile going back the next morning. So I believe this is absolutely essential for the future.
Brenda, I think it's so important that, obviously we feel like, yes, it's the right thing to do. And lots of us, that's what drives us. But I like that you bring in that piece around business sense and just trying to make a case for folks who might not be there yet, right? So I really appreciated that. I'm going to go on to Ken for the same question.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, I mean, I do approach this, given my day job from a business perspective, at a personal level, as a man raised by a strong woman who is proud to surround himself with strong women. I can't believe that we actually are still having this conversation, but except to acknowledge that we do and we must. So a major focus of the CLR and virtually every other representative of the construction sector is to ensure there's a labor supply to meet what is expected to be a significant, perhaps unprecedented demand over the next 1 to 5 years and beyond. I think it's Build Force. Their data indicates we're going to lose about 41,000 construction workers by 2027 for retirement, but there's only 32,800 people that are going to actually enter the industry based on those estimates. So the bottom line is that the industry needs to recruit workers, and a major recruitment focus needs to be on women who, frankly, I mean, it's 50% of our potential workforce, but it's only 5% in the unionized construction sector. And I think it's even less than that as a ratio in the non-unionized sector. So I know as we go through the question, Suzanne, we're going to get more and more into the details about a call to action and what employers and others can do. So I'll maybe keep my powder a little bit dry on those points for now, except that I look forward to the day when we're no longer talking about how we attract underrepresented groups to the industry, but we're talking about what a huge difference they've made to our sector.
I'm sure we've heard, folks who've been tuning into the conference over the last few weeks, we hear that piece around, recruitment is super important, but it can't be the only thing, right? The retention piece is such a factor that's missing. So I really appreciate you lifting that up, Ken, because it's such a huge part of the conversation that can't be ignored. So on that note, over to Brynne.
Well, I was thinking about this question, and I have a bit of an academic answer and then a personal one. And so on the academic side, we know that women are about 5% of the construction industry. And the building trades helped to commission a paper in 2017 that talked to tradeswomen about what their experiences were in the trades. And shockingly, 40% identified bullying and harassment and intimidation on construction sites. So obviously that's not acceptable. But from a personal perspective, what has really struck me in working with tradeswomen is that, unlike in other industries that have identified that they need more women, like police, fire, the army, we've not moved the dial. And I think that we haven't moved the dial at all in the last 40 years because of the nature of our industry, that women will show up at a construction site, they're not given the benefit of the doubt, they have to prove themselves, they have to prove that they're better at the job, that they're more committed, that they're more talented, and often they do overperform, and they win over the crew, and then they go to the next job, and they have to do it again. And that is exhausting, to spend an entire career or proving yourself over and over and over again and going back to day one over and over and over again. And that's why as an industry, we have to change the whole culture. And I think that really starts with not just getting more women into the trades, which we must do. We need to put women in leadership positions. They need to be foremen. They need to be instructors. They need to be union leaders. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thanks, Brynne. I love your passion on this. I know when you come from a personal perspective, I know how much work you have done in the trades, unionized trade sector for so many years, and just recognizing there's a lot more work to do. And I'm glad you're at the helm of the BC Building Trades right now, helping push that dial. So, Guy, how about you?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so at BCIT I work with Tamara Pongrantz because that's part of our school, that portfolio for trades discovery for women. So I certainly get a firsthand perspective and appreciate the work that she's done over many years to try and introduce more women to trades. But I think Suzanne touched on it and others as well. Retention is a key issue, and that's that's what that does require the culture shift to make it a welcoming workplace. And because as Ken and others talked about as well, we absolutely need the talent and perspective of women in the trades workplace. And so being kind of with a manufacturing background and a bit of a data geek now with my 20 years in post-secondary, I'll just share some numbers around that talks about the attraction and the retention, because it is that retention piece where we can probably make the most inroads, and then we can, with better retention, we'll also then be able to get greater attraction, I'm sure. So if we take a look at the completion for entry-level training in trades, for BC, like all of the trades, it works out to be about 20% women. And then when we look at the completion of apprenticeship, i.e. 4 years or 5 years down the journey, how long have they stayed in that profession to complete their apprenticeship, it goes from 20 down to 7%. So there's a fair bit of loss. And I should say those numbers include the culinary and personal services trades. So when you peel those out, which is more like the BCIT type setting, you look at the foundation or the entry-level programming at about 9%, and the completion for the level 4 or level 3 for some trades are at about 4% women. That's a big drop off, and that's a very low number, 4%. And what's pretty interesting is there is a range in those sort of construction and transportation and mechanical trades. And it might be interesting at some time too to look across that spectrum, and there might be we might be able to glean some interesting things about what to do to help solve some of the problems. Because I'll just share some of that range, which was, like I said, pretty interesting. On the mechanical side, which includes automotive and heavy duty and industrial mechanics, they're right on that average number of 9% foundations graduates are women, 4% apprentice graduates are women, so 9 to 4. If we look across the spectrum in construction, and this is interesting, I don't know if can't have hands on the buzzers, I guess, in this format, but I was going to ask, what is the what trades have the highest female participation and retention? And because what's interesting, it's that from the stats, again, these are BC government stats for all graduates from all, they cover all post-secondary programs, but of course I was looking at trades. The heavy metal trades, the welding, metal fabrication, boilermaker, those are the highest, have the highest participation of women at the completion of the apprenticeship journey. They start with about 17% in foundation, and we have 8% of the graduates of that field in BC are women. So I don't know what it says about heavy metal, maybe trades women rock or something like that, but either way, that's good. And if when you get to electrical, you're down to 12% in the foundation and 5% for graduates at the apprenticeship. Plumbing is 7% in foundation and 3% for the red seal or level 4. And carpentry, that's the interesting one, I think, that deserve some further look. It starts at 13% attractive, so pretty attractive relative to others. The level 4 completion for apprenticeship is at 2%. So there's a huge drop off there. And that, you know, and I know Brynn touched on some things that happen and why they would happen more in some groups than others. That's what would be interesting. So I think with all of those numbers, I'll stop right there.
I think, you know, we don't talk about the data enough, and I know in my household, many of you will know that you know, we talk a lot about this issue, about women in trades, about what we need to do and how we can change the world. And one of the biggest pieces of conversation always is about the collection of data, how important that is, and how important that is when we're talking to government, stakeholders, municipalities, all of those things, having those numbers laid out is really important. So I appreciate, appreciate the data. I love it. I love hearing about it, and I'm still kind of boggled, quite frankly, by some of it that it hasn't moved, considering how much work has been going into this. But I also am not boggled by it. I guess I wish I could say we were moving the dial farther, but I know there's amazing people out there. I can think of tradeswomen in every single one of those trades that you're talking about that are out there right now. They're either listening or watching us, or they're on the job, supporting other women. They're on, in social media. We have regional reps out there lifting each other up and all of that. So, I see a brighter light ahead, and I really appreciate that. Data is important. We need to know that. So thank you for that. And Cindy, how about you?
Thanks, Sussanne. I'm going to start with a few statistics too, because this is a really important topic. I mean, it's something that we absolutely have to get a handle on. So at the Industry Training Authority, I'll just keep calling it the ITA. I know people don't like acronyms, but it's a little easier. At the ITA, we too have been trying to move the needle on women in trades, and in particular in women in underrepresented workplaces. So as was noted, women constitute a large number in, say, hairstyling or aesthetics, and then in culinary, in particular, the baking area. So if you just factor those out, and those are great careers as well, if you factor those out, the underrepresented workplaces, we've really had initiatives to look at. So over the years, we've supported various programs to attract more women, and for the most part, it has worked. So in the last 3 years, for instance, we have increased registrations by women of 17% in the underrepresented trades. But even more significant is the fact that in March of this year, and we've had this crazy year when things were kind of put on hold, for everybody over the last year with the pandemic. But in March of 2021, women in underrepresented trades were 56% of women apprenticeship registration. So out of, I'll just check my notes here, out of 3,627 women in total, 2,019 of them were women in underrepresented trades. So that's great. But it's not enough just to increase the numbers. I always say, then what happens to them when they get to the workplace? Well, then we go from 2021 back to, the mid last century, frankly. And women are finding misogyny and discrimination, barriers to advancement, not to mention sexual and personal harassment. And we've known women that have expressed that they've left the skilled trades workforce because of unwelcoming environments. That's not acceptable. It really isn't. And then you layer on intersectionality. You layer on the fact that a woman is a person of color, or she's Indigenous, she has a disability, or she's a member of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. And she's going to experience that unwelcome environment in spades, frankly. So great, we're credentialing more women, not so great where we're sending them. So the other thing I think we really need to recognize, it's not on the woman. It's not on the woman who has the skilled trades and goes to the workforce to change that environment. It's not. It is truly a systemic issue that needs to be addressed by leaders, co-workers, and we need to build allies in order to shift this culture. We really do. And one way that ITA has done that, and has, is in the beginning stages, of course, this is going to take some time to shift culture. But one way that we're trying to shift that culture is by partnering. We've partnered with the BC Women in Trades, great organization, and to deliver the Be More Than a Bystander program. And it's an excellent program that addresses the blatant discrimination and harassment in the workplace, and equips men in the industry, because it's going to have to come from them. It equips men in the industry, their leaders, their employees, with the confidence and knowledge to know they need to speak up. If they see one of their coworkers or somebody treating a woman in a very disrespectful, harassing manner, they need to say, that's not right. Stop it. And the At ITA, over 90% of staff have taken the More Than a Bystander workshop, and 25 men on staff at ITA have received the 3-day intensive Train the Trainer course, so they can go out and train. We're hoping that the institutions that deliver the training for women are going to be embracing, and many of them have, but embracing it on a huge level. IT has also hosted monthly meetings for men to share their experience about being better allies in that workforce. Another thing to remember, harassment is actually against the law. It's against the law. We have lots of WCB rules that are law, and people need to use those laws, because that's another way we can shift that culture. Another way that ITA is supporting women in trades is by equipping them with leadership skills and the confidence to lead others. So there's a program called the Regional Representative Program. And again, it's created in partnership between the ITA and BC Women in Trades. And it's giving women the resources and training to become leaders in their industry, leaders in their unions, leaders in their workplaces, and inspiring others to do the same or pursue a career in skilled trades. And only through all of that will we be able to actually shift that needle. So as I said, it's unfortunate that sometimes 2021 feels like 1950, but that needle has to move.
And I'm really happy you brought up the Be More Than a Bystander program. Many of you know, and I know some of you have also taken it. President of the Federation, Laird Cronk, has taken it and is a big fan, a big cheerleader of the program. And Brynn and I were working together when Laird took it, and I know me personally, like the impact that it immediately had on him. It changed his life. He said, "I can't unknow what I know," and I didn't know, right? And he is a super progressive guy, and he's, I'd go so far as to call him a feminist, but it really shifted the dial for him about how he thinks about the world from a woman's perspective, with a different light and a different vision on things. So thanks for bringing up that program. I know there's lots of folks out there. We offered it out to our executive council for the BC Federation of Labor. We had, some of the Train the Trainer folks come in and present it to our executive also. So we're really supportive of that program. And thank you for all of you that play a role in supporting the BC Centre for Women in Trades. And you also brought up something I think is really important. So I'm just going to do a bit of a pitch, a commercial, we'll call it, which is the Regional Rep program, which is so important. What seems like 10 years ago now, we brought some leaders, tradeswomen leaders together out at Harrison for a week and gave them a bunch of different skills training, brought them together so that they could build relations with one another, get some media training, get some public speaking training, learn how to run meetings, all of those things. And that program is looking for more people. So if you're out there watching and that seems like something interesting to you, you can go on the BC Centre for Women in Trades Facebook page or send them an email. I'm pretty sure you all know how to get in touch with them by now. And if not, feel free to reach out to me. I'll help connect you up with people. But, we're always looking for more people to get into that program. The more leaders that we have out there that we can support and you can support one another is so important. That's another piece of the puzzle, right? About how we shift that culture. So like Brynn said, lifting women up into leadership positions, whether on the job site or in their unions or in their companies. That's super important. So my next question, before we're going to go to the audience for some questions, and I think there's some good questions coming in the Whova app, is around, it's a call to action, I'll say. And, you all are leaders in the industry or leaders within your organizations. You have a big impact on how we can continue to do this work. So if you can think about from your organization's standpoint, what kind of commitments to this work are you maybe already working on, or what do you see coming in the future? I like to see like this, if you're sort of dreaming about, what's your high in the sky? If you could see the change and all of those things, like what is your organization doing to help make that change, and where do we need to go, and what are you doing to help that? So I am going to start off with Ken on this one.
You said Ken, right? Okay, well, you know, I suppose the way to reframe this question is, what would I do if I had the opportunity to do it? And certainly something we promote amongst our employer members. We hear often about, you know, I mentioned earlier about the need for a greater supply of labor. And often the response is, well, what are you doing to attract and retain a large segment of the potential labor force in women, underrepresented, other Indigenous people, and other underrepresented groups? And the conversation invariably always goes to how are your work sites, how are your job sites positioned to give women the facilities, the opportunities that their male counterparts already enjoy. So the conversation includes things like ensuring employers have a clear path to the construction industry for women through education, training, apprenticeship, and opportunities for advancement. It's been mentioned before. Ensuring that all work environments recognize and accommodate the needs of women, including proper facilities, PPE, clothing, mentorship from men to help them on the work sites and give them the opportunity to be seen by their peers as equals. I think employers also need to implement a zero tolerance policy where they educate the men in their companies, and we talked about some of those education opportunities, like be more than a bystander, but educate the men in their companies of the need to not only welcome their female peers, but to ensure they're properly supported in every respect. In fact, every employer should offer equity, diversification, and inclusion training to their employees, and it should be a requirement for every new hire to take that training. In fact, I also believe it should be part of all apprenticeship training curriculums. Employers should have proper onboarding processes that provide the right introduction for women to their companies, and ensure there is well communicated and sincere pathways within the company for women to air any concerns or issues that they have and know that they are going to be addressed. And finally, and it was mentioned before, and I'm a huge believer in this, finally, and perhaps the most important point, is the need for employers to promote women into leadership positions so that they have that much greater ability, influence, and authority to make the changes necessary to create truly inclusive work environments. It was mentioned before, it's one thing to talk about apprenticeship training, talk about the work that's being done in the schools to explain to young people why construction careers, construction trades are a viable consideration for them. It's another thing once they get there to make sure that we're retaining these people. And the only way we're going to retain women in the workforce is by giving them every opportunity that their male peers already enjoy as a given. We need to get to the point where it isn't even a discussion, it isn't even a question, it's automatic. It's basic rights and freedoms. And there are employers, I don't want to suggest that all employers are starting from ground zero. There are a lot of employers in the BC construction community that are working hard to bring about the types of changes that we're talking about here today and that I've mentioned. And I would encourage women wanting to enter construction trades, wanting to find employment in the construction sector, to reach out to companies and quite frankly be quite blunt with their questions about what they do to welcome women into their companies. They can also call the BC Building Trades, they can contact the Construction Labor Relations Association, and we will do our part to steer them and direct them to those companies that have made those commitments.
Thanks, Ken. Brynn.
Well, I think one of the initiatives that I'm most excited about is the Community Benefits Initiative that we're partnering with the BC government on through the BCIB, and that makes a key pillar of that initiative is priority hire for underrepresented groups, including women. But I don't want to talk too much about that because Brenda, I think, is well tapped in to that initiative. I think the industry, certainly on the unionized side, it is starting to change. I mean, when I joined the building trades many years ago, I walked into a convention hall where I was the only woman in the room, a room of 100 people. But it is changing. What I've seen through Build Together, our Women in Trades group, is that group of women that came together, about 5-6 years ago, they are now moving into leadership positions. And we do see the Insulators Union vice president is a woman. We see women in women reps now in many, many unions. And a critical change is the number of women instructors, because that will change an entire generation of apprentices. If you learn a trade from a woman, you've completely normalized that a woman can be a tradesperson. One of the, and I should also say, our unions are leading. If you go to the Industry Training Authority and you look at the statistics for sponsors of women in the trades, you will see our unions. IBEW 993, 23% of their apprentices are women, 23%. And that didn't happen by accident. That took a sincere and earnest, dedicated recruitment process to go out and say, we want to change our industry. And I raise my hands to Angeline Camille, who has been part of that heavy lifting. And it goes on, the first, second, third top sponsors are in the building trades. And then I should mention that we recently launched a campaign for improved sanitation and for flush toilets on construction industries. And at first, folks are like, well, that can't be possible. But, we see many projects with over 100 construction workers on them. These are multi-million-dollar condominium projects. These are staple sites that are, 2-year builds. And it's eminently possible to put flush toilets. And we know that people self-select out of projects because of the state of the washroom facilities. So those are some of the things that we're working on.
If you haven't seen the program on social media or on the interwebs anywhere, it's Get Flushed. So if you literally just type Get Flushed on Facebook or in your Google search, you will get taken to the website. It's great. Brynne, if you want to tell us what the website is, that'd be awesome, because it's a really good campaign and it's so important.
Yeah, I think it's letsgetflushed.ca.
But I didn't want to give the bad information without having it. But it's we'll make sure that we get that information to you. It's a great campaign, and I know from so many people that I've talked to that having adequate, clean facilities, particularly for women, we've got tradeswomen working on our Period Promise campaign and all of those things, and it's all tied together with the retention piece and making safe work sites for people, which is an obligation of an employer. So next, I'm going to go to Guy.
Okay, thanks for that. It's hard to follow up that piece, but we've heard from Sussanne and Brynne and Ken and everybody that leadership matters, and so the groups I'm sort of affiliated with. Trades Training BC, the executive is gender balanced. I came to TTBC after, I guess, about 8 years of being president for the British Columbia Association of Trades and Technical Administrators, which is in essence the operating arm of TTBC. It took us a few years, but we've had a while now, again, where the executive of that group is gender balanced. And I know for myself, I work with, as I mentioned, Tamara at BCIT, at the Trades Discovery. Our faculty is pretty much gender balanced there. We do Trades Discovery for women and only cohorts, but also for men. And we've been able to have a gender balanced faculty for that group, so we're pretty glad for that. And I just want to say, in from whether it be promoting or you know, at BCIT, since I came back to BCIT in this role as Dean of the School of Transportation, I've had to hire one associate dean, and that happened to be Sonia Boskovich, who comes more from an engineering than a trades background, but it's interesting to note that women in engineering is about 4.5%. Sounds kind of familiar. When I left Vancouver Island University, I strongly promoted Glynis Steen to take my place. She was involved in the competition there, and of course with Tamara in the trades discovery. So the sort of the promoting, supporting, hiring women, you know, these people have been, they're good colleagues. You can have a great conversation with them. They're good educators, and that's the field we're in, so that's important. And they're good administrators, and they're good leaders. And they happen to be women, but they actually got those positions and based on their ability to do the job more than anything else. And I think that's, you know, that's just, if we certainly keep our eyes open, it's all around us, and they can fill all these roles and do a remarkable job. So that's on the leadership front. On the other sort of area, I could say at Trades Training BC, we've applied for some federal funding to develop a module on teamwork and diversity that we would hope to be able to provide to all apprentices and foundation students when they're going through the training vein. We'll wait to see if we're successful with that, but I'm also happy to say that that both ITA and the BC Construction Foundation have supported that initiative, and they'll be absolutely totally on board if we get to move that one forward. And I also think that you know, we heard some great numbers of coming up in the most recent sort of attraction and entrance to the workplace for women in the trades. I was looking at the Union Training and Innovation Plan announcement, and it talked about young women continue to be less likely to express an interest in a career in the skilled trades. According to a survey by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, only 2% of 15-year-old female students indicated they were planning to pursue a career in the skilled trades. So young women, we need to find ways to introduce in the high schools and maybe even before, to make sure that we can start normalizing that women, these are roles for women. These are great career paths and great career opportunities. So, you know, maybe we'll have to roll up our sleeves at BCIT and other partners in the Trades Training BC consortium to see what we can do to reach out to our school district partners and start, maybe we need to have trades discovery for high school women, young women only, and things like that we can start to, again, reach out and think of things that we haven't done to date to just start normalizing it. So that's, I'm going to leave it at that then. So and look forward to questions.
That's such an important piece, right? Is the, like, if you don't see yourself in something, why would you ever think that you could do it, right? So like, representation matters, visual representation matters, you know, whether it's pictures of a diverse workforce, actual diverse workforce. Often when we see pictures of tradespeople, it is all white men, quite frankly, and that's work to do. Although I've seen lots of really good work coming out of all of your organizations that is changing the scene on that, and as it should be. And then the other piece I just want to touch on, I know the regional reps are out there. Many of you are watching, and they're actually starting to do these talks in schools, and that's so important. They were delayed a little bit by COVID, but they're doing the virtual Zoom into classrooms and talking to classrooms, and particularly young women, about the opportunity to get into the trades. And just, you know, as a young woman, this was never something I thought that would be, you know, ever to go into workforce. And my dad's an electrician, and it just was, I never saw myself in that. And I know that you hear that a lot from women who go into the trades at sort of an older age in life. So Super important work. I'm so glad the regional reps are out there talking to folks. It's crucial. It's crucial that people see themselves and in the jobs, right? This is great work, and there's some cool tradeswomen out there that are talking up their jobs. So I love that. Let's go to Cindy.
Great, thank you. Now, one thing that's great about being the chair of the board and working with everyone on the board is we work with our CEO as well, Shelley Gray, in setting the strategic plan for the organization. And our number one goal, and we set this a few years ago, is to have an inclusive trades training and apprenticeship system that reflects our diverse population. So that's our overarching principle through the lens through which we look at various programs and that. So we look at all of our goals, of course, but the overarching one is the one that we apply to what we do. And so we're really quite excited this year because this coming fiscal year, we've been able to secure a little over $18 million funding through the Canada-BC Workforce Development Agreement. And that is going to provide us with resources to fund 33 different programs, which will provide trades training for women, Indigenous people, and equity-deserving groups. And but there's also, when I talked about intersectionality last time and recognizing that there are multiple barriers sometimes that can affect a woman's ability to participate in the trades. And that's why part of that funding is going to go towards sponsoring new programs aimed at persons with disabilities, immigrants, people of color, and the 2S LGBTQ+ community. And we talk about, and we heard earlier some statistics about women who aren't completing their apprenticeship. So it's great to get people interested in it, get women interested, and then we need to help them along the way. And we have an outreach program targeting women apprentices who have been inactive in their apprenticeship for over 12 months. So we have a team that goes out and they do one-on-one support to help the apprentices re-engage with their apprenticeship and help them with the skills they need towards certification. And we've also, through that initiative, have found that sometimes it's a learning disability that they may have. Sometimes it's other resources they need when they are experiencing, again, sort of negative workplaces. So in the last 2 years, we have reached out to 200 women who have decided to, accept the help offered and to re-engage. So that's a good first step. I think, again, to go back to, because you're asking about the call to action for employers, is to take those steps that are necessary to internally build a culture that prioritizes inclusion. And one thing we did, and the board made the decision in 2020 that we formed an equity and engagement department, and which has truly set the tone for diversity and inclusion at the organization, but also then as we reach out to others. So staff participate, besides the more than a bystander, that staff participate in weekly learning and training sessions that include topics such as trans inclusion, a course called Words Matter, how you say your words, what words you use, and some upcoming workshops on anti-racism. And in equipping the staff with an equity and diversity lens influences not only their bonds with each other on the job, but it also with the industry partners and the clients that we work with. So that's really important, because that's, again, that shifting in culture. Increasing awareness, I think, is one of the first steps. And using, what do we use? We use education, we use courses, we use peer-to-peer groups, people talking to each other. Another simple thing is, just setting the tone by considering the language people use. So if you've got a job posting or a newsletter, email, those kinds of things, use journey person instead of journeyman. Use team or people rather than guys. Just simple things like that. I mean, we use them in our daily lives, right? And you kind of catch yourself sometimes. And we have to be able to to sort of adjust that in ourselves. And we're on that continuum. We're moving a little bit in that direction, and make courses mandatory at your workplaces. Make these courses mandatory. And so for, current and new employees, let them know what kind of a welcoming environment you have. Let them know that certain types of behavior is not tolerated. Make it a priority, frankly, because we find, we encourage employers to take an active approach, but usually that is set at the top. It's set by the people who run organizations. It's set by leaders, by team leaders, by departmental leaders, and flows from there. And that welcoming environment is so important to women and to others who are normally underrepresented in workplaces. And I encourage all employers and challenge all employers to take that on, even in small steps, and build on that.
And last but certainly not least, Brenda, I know we have some Indigenous tradespeople out there, tradeswomen out there who really want to see and hear Indigenous voices being lifted up. And so I want to make sure that you tell us, the question, but we'd like to hear a bit more from you, because I know we've been all chatting a lot, so you are certainly on our list of panelists in order. I want to make sure that you know that we want to hear from you, and that there are Indigenous women out there who are cheering you on and want to hear your voice.
Well, thank you. And Sussanne, I'm first of all, I'm going to apologize to you, because you've asked us to speak from our perspective as employers, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to speak to you from my perspective and experiences as an Indigenous elder. Wow, that's the first time I've actually said that in public, but I'll get over it. I'm going to speak to you as an Indigenous elder, a woman, and a grandmother. The Royal Commission on the Status of Women was 54 years ago. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal People was 30 years ago. I started the First Nations Programs and Services Department at BCIT 27 years ago. And that's when I seriously began my advocacy for equitable participation of Indigenous people in skills, training, education, employment, the economy. And that's when I began my career in diversity, equity, and inclusion, long before the terms were combined to be what they represent today. And in the intervening years, there was 26 years of negotiating the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the 7 years of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's work, and presented its final report in the 94 calls to action in December 2015. But it's only when I held the community benefits agreement in my hands did I see something that could make a tangible difference for Indigenous communities and peoples. For the first time, Indigenous peoples were priority hiring, when we are generally at the bottom of the list, if we're on the list at all. For the first time, there was a tool to hold contractors accountable, those who make commitments to Indigenous employment and procurement, only to walk away from them once the contract has been landed. A tool that would hold unions accountable for their dispatch practices. For the first time, a concrete approach to addressing racism and discrimination on construction sites, ensuring Indigenous people would work in a safe, welcoming, and respectful workplace. And not just Indigenous people, women, members of the LGBTQAI, 2X+, and differently abled communities. And for the first time in my many years of working in DEI, I was elated. Here was something that could bring real change. Unfortunately, the elation was short-lived, and I do not mean to offend anyone here. And after my many, many years of being in this field, I sometimes feel all we are doing is tinkering around the edges. Because when you live in a system that has been built on patriarchy, colonization, and white privilege, that is not going to be dismantled, as those who benefit from that structure are not inclined to change. So the lawsuits and the challenges flew. And I was deeply saddened. I was sad thinking about those ancestors who fought so hard so that we could have so little. And I was saddened thinking about the descendants who will look back through the fog of history and see that we lacked the wisdom and the courage to make social change, to create an equitable and just society that many, far too many, will fight to hold on to a status quo comfortable with the privileges and benefits that they have received at the expense of so many. So what are the challenges for employers, for us as a society and DEI? Perhaps I should be more optimistic, more hopeful. But after 27 years, the task ahead seems insurmountable to me sometimes. How do we pull down a system built using colonial and patriarchal superiority over hundreds of years? A system that has been so normalized to be invisible to those who benefit from its structure. I have moments when I'm discouraged, yet when I see a just and rightful cause, I am motivated to fight on, and this is a just and good fight for Indigenous people and reconciliation. It's a just and good fight for women. It's a just and good fight for LGBTQAI2X+ people. And it's a just and good fight for those who are differently abled. I believe it's a just and good fight for our society, our communities, and our province. But most of all, when the 7th generation looks back on how I walked on this earth, I want them to say with all honesty, she did her best. In closing, I thank and honor Tswanak and Mingwan for their teachers and encouragement. Language.
Thank you, Brenda. I raise my hands to you, and I am so thankful that we have you at the table, that you have been fighting this fight all your life. I know you say, you've been at it for 27 years, but I know it's a life's work for you. And I'm so thankful. I guess, we have some questions in the chat and we'll get to that, but I guess, when we look at what my challenge is to all of us, right? There's some questions in the chat around allyship and like true allyship and all of that. Brenda's been doing a lot of heavy lifting. Indigenous women have been doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting. And I guess my challenge to all of us who aren't Indigenous, all of us who are, who were unwelcome settlers or families whenever they came back in the day, that, that we pick it up a little bit harder than we did, whether you've been doing this work a little bit already on the side of your desk, that you champion this cause in a new energized way, and that you use Brenda's words and her passion. You can see her passion on her face, and that this is emotional for her. I thought I was going to actually have to get tissues myself, because I have no apologies for being tearful and a crier. This is so incredibly important. Here, Minister Mark, who used to be, attached to the ITA and is now doing other great work, often talk about, making the table bigger. We're all pedaling together, like all of these different things. They're not cliche comments. They are challenges to us as white settlers, as allies, to actually ally up, right? Show up, do the work. when you're sitting around a table and somebody's missing. Comment, who's missing? Why are we here? Why aren't they here? So I guess that's probably my challenge out to all of you, to the participants, to the industry participants, particularly, right? Those that have access to actually make some changes here, that we try and figure out new ways to do that and not leave the work on the backs of Indigenous women particularly, but that we all need to do this work. So that's my challenge. Brenda, thank you so much for, you do never need to apologize for talking about the space that you take up in the world and the, you know, and the fight and the journey that you've had over the years. We're so thankful for it. And so I have some great questions from the chat. I will just kind of open it up to folks. I won't assign the questions to anyone. We've already talked a little bit of allyship, so I'm going to kind of, we'll come back to that question because one of the questions that of course is near and dear to my heart, something the BC Federation of Labor has been talking about, and the BC Building Trades and the ITA and all of those things is, you know, and jump on whoever wants to talk about this, is, you know, when we talked about the numbers, Guy, you provided some great numbers for us, and it seems like the higher regulated a trade is, the higher completions there were. So do you think that compulsory trades will positively impact completions for women in trades? I think that's because we've been having this conversation. I know the ITA is doing some hard work and heavy lifting with compulsory trades, but I just wonder if anyone has any thoughts on that question, lifting up the compulsory trades conversation. Anyone want to? Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Sorry. Well, I feel compelled to do it since they're talking about compulsory trades, and certainly it's we are going to. It's going to be a big project for us in the coming year or so. Government has made the wise step of reintroducing what we call compulsory trades. If perhaps not everyone is versed in that, there are a number of trades who in the past were needed, you know, Red Seal certification in order to work on job sites. And back in 2001, 2002, compulsory trades were eliminated in British Columbia, which I may add was the only jurisdiction in Canada to do that. And anyway, this government has the foresight to reinstitute it. We're going to do it in such a way as to create as few barriers as possible. That's one thing our board was adamant about, that we would try to make this as seamless as possible, because there's been 20 years of people who have, you know, had training and were able and have been working as tradespeople and perhaps have not had their certifications. The numbers in some instances are low, and in some other areas are a bit higher. So we are going to be very sensitive to that. And we are going to do our best to roll it out in such a way that it doesn't disadvantage people, and there will be supports in place. And not all those working parts have been, you know, figured out yet, but we are certainly working with it. Now, as to whether completion rates will be better, completion rates vary on many levels. I'll be honest, I have not seen any statistics talking about what if it is a factor, if being in a compulsory trade or not is a factor in completion. But the one thing that a compulsory trade designation will get everybody is the ability to, well, the old expression, a journey person, right? That person could pick up his or her their tools and move on to the next site, and that's what you want. You want that flexibility, and so it certainly will certify people to work in other jurisdictions as well, other provinces, other countries. And Canadians are well known to produce, you know, have a highly skilled workforce when it comes to the skilled trades, and we are sought in different projects around the world. I think whether trades are compulsory or not, I still think those barriers to women happen because of cultural issues in workplaces. And we've spent lots of time discussing that, so I don't need to go over that anymore. But completion rates sometimes fall off for other reasons. Another one for women is childcare. Women are still, no matter how equitable relationships are, women are still generally the majority of those who give care in a household. And hopefully with more expansion of childcare spaces and workplace spaces, it's not that difficult to find daycares in schools, for instance, which is fabulous, for people dropping off older kids, dropping off younger kids, or the people who work there themselves, teachers being able to have their kids there. But you don't often find a daycare on a construction site. So, I mean, those kinds of cultural things have to change as well. So they can be something as something for anywhere from childcare to discrimination that prevents this. But we have reached out to women, and it's really important to keep supporting people on their way to becoming a journey tradesperson, just like you would in any other educational setting. Students need help no matter what they're studying, and that's one of the things we need to do. Thank you.
Healthcare facilities, written down here. Somehow it's going to weave that in. So thank you for doing that for me. It's a big issue. Brynn, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously I'm very passionate about restoring compulsory trades, but I think in particular for women, we know about half of the apprentices in our system never attend technical in-class training. And so right away, there's a major incentive for employers to release apprentices so that they get their in-class training. We also know that women can be sort of secluded into one task, and it's very hard for them to be moved around and receive training in the full scope of the trade. And this would compel employers to make sure that they didn't just keep women on light duty or assistant, that they actually move through and get all of the components of the trade. And finally, that red seal is so powerful as a woman to be able to say, I have it, here it is, I am skilled. And the more women that we can get red seals, I think the better and better it's going to be.
Can I chime in on this before I move on to the next question? Don't have to. We got lots of questions. Don't worry. Okay, so there's a couple questions around allyship, and let's see if I can weave them together a little bit. So the panelists are all allies is one of the questions. How do we take people who aren't allies and encourage them to become allies? And then tied to that is what moved you from maybe just being a supporter or, contemplating, like moving from being an ally to maybe using the words accomplice. I see that in another, chat, like the language, like Cindy said, words matter. And so sort of more action-oriented language around this to becoming champions. So talk a little bit about allyship, why those of us who are on this panel are champions, and how do we bring other people along with us? That's always so important. Is like, how do we build that bridge, and how do we bring people over that bridge with us? Right? Anyone want to start on that one? I know that was a big question. Yeah, Guy, go ahead.
Maybe I'll jump in and Brenda, I don't know if this will help much, but I always have great hope in the youth. And the youth of today, they do tend to seem, judging by my own kids, have a much better sense of justice than I'm going to say when I was growing up. So, and I think the more we can pull youth into the changes required, the quicker or the better we can accelerate the culture changes that need to happen in both the workplace and society. So, and I'll just sort of harken back again to in the training system, we need to find the ways to provide the language. I talked about teamwork with diversity, and that's what that's all about, is providing the language. It's providing, some of the tools for the younger folks to help accelerate that change. Because the one thing, you know, I am pretty sure of, like, besides a bit of a greater sense of justice, they vote with their feet. And therefore, if for employers that want to have a steady workforce, they're going to have to, as they get more young people in the workforce, and again, we provide them with the right tools, I think that absolutely these things will be important in order to retain the skilled workforce, just because of the nature that I've seen, like I say, with the young folks. If whether it be scheduling, whether it be certain conditions, whether it be the work of the environment, if they're not comfortable, they just leave. It's as simple as that. They don't ask questions, and whether they listen to that one bit of advice, that find something you love and do that. There's lots of things my kids didn't listen to, but that one seems to stick. And I think that's the way with a lot of kids too. So I'm going to say there's hope in youth for moving this quicker than folks with gray hair like me at the tail end of my career have been able to do.
I'm going to go to Brenda and then Ken.
Okay, yeah, Guy, Bob George, who worked with me at great honor of working with him at BCIT. He was elder from Tsleil-Waututh, and one of his, I remember after a particularly horrendous day when we had 3 Indigenous apprentices leave, he reminded me that not to focus so much on the older people, that we needed to focus all of our energies and our love on our youth. But going back to the question, Sussanne, about an ally, educate yourself. That's your responsibility. Learn how to intervene in a safe and respectful way. And don't speak for equity groups, but amplify their voices. And you become an ally when the equity group recognizes you as such. It's not one of these things you can slap on a name tag, I'm an ally. And you need to be authentic, and you need to be true in everything that you do as an ally. And you need to always, always take the leadership and guidance of the equity group that you're an ally for. Miigwech.
Thank you, Brenda. That's very wise words, and I appreciate them. Ken.
I agree with both Guy and Brenda. Certainly, I think this next generation has far more insight, I think, into acceptance and inclusion than the generation I come from and others before. But I'll go back to something that was said earlier. As far as allyship and supporting women in trades, I strongly believe it's critically important to get women into leadership positions. It's, people allies. If I can call myself that, I hope others might agree, but allies who see I'd say the value of women, because there's less voice in the construction industry than there should be from women. But quite frankly, just the strength of the knowledge, the experience, the skills, the passion that women bring to the jobs. I think putting them in leadership positions not only gives a greater chance of encouraging change, but it helps those individuals who might be concerned by what they haven't experienced in the past understand the value of women in the workforce, and they become allies simply by understanding better. I frankly, I mentioned before, I work with strong women. I've got a woman on my board of directors who's the CEO of a major construction company here in the province, who is an incredible, in my opinion, an incredible example to not only women, but for organizations to experience what it's like to have a broader voice at the table from men and women, and how much more successful your company, your economy is as a result.
That's a great answer, and allyship is an action. It is a constant. It's constant. It should always be in movement, right? And I used to call myself a cheerleader for the women in trades, because it's not up to me whether or not I call myself an ally or a champion or an accomplice. And then they started seeing me as such, and I will continue, to ally up for the women in trades, for the BC Centre for Women in Trades, all of you out there, and I hope you know that. And it is an action item, right? And that is a call to all of us, particularly as leaders in our industry. So that's a great question. Whoever put that in there, I really appreciated that. And sort of on the same vein, and Brenda, maybe I'll start with you. Around, because of the work that you're doing with the BCIB, which is so incredibly important, making sure that the community benefit agreements are in place, and we'd sure like to see more of those, a lot more of those in my perspective. But the question that I got from the audience is around approaches to recruitment and retention when we're talking about equity seeking groups. Like, are there different approaches that we should be contemplating, whether we're talking about Indigenous folks coming into the industry or other equity groups? And maybe, yeah, Brenda, if you want to sort of chime in on that.
Relationship, relationship, relationship. It's the most important aspect of recruitment. It's the most important thing to, particularly if you're working with Indigenous communities, that you develop a relationship, that you have a relationship with communities if you want to bring them. We have no reason to trust contractors. We have no reason to trust unions. History has shown us that, this is not a very good path for us to go down. Yeah, it's important to have, Indigenous people who are recruiting, because they can speak to the challenges. I can remember working with Tom Sigurdsson, the prior Brynn, around educating communities about unions. And I've been doing this for 10 years now, about the mistrust that communities, Indigenous people have about unions, and the mistrust they have about, contractors. So, it's not going to be an easy fix. We have 100 and 200 years of history that we have to deal with. And we're not going to deal with that by, like I said, tinkering around the edges. We have to have a real commitment. We have to act and speak from our hearts, and we have to be authentic in what we do. And if we're going to recruit people into these jobs, then they have to be coming into a safe place where they feel supported. They have the transition supports that are required. Cindy, you talked about some of the challenges for women. A major challenge for Indigenous people is not having a license. This is a major barrier and challenge for Indigenous people, and the system of getting a license now, by the time you start off at the very beginning, the project's gone down the road before you even got your license. So there's so many issues that we need to consider and be part of discussing and finding solutions for. But yeah, thank you, Big Wedge.
Thank you. So important as we contemplate relationships, and that it is ongoing and that it doesn't happen overnight. I think that's an incredibly important piece for those of us who may come from different equity groups, but that's part of our work, is that those relationships need to be consistent, they need to be genuine, and they need to be, it's not just an ask to those from the equity groups, right? And so I really appreciate that. Brenda, does anyone else want to chime in on this question before we move to the next? We have a couple minutes left, but yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to thanks, Brenda, for your insights on relationships there. And I think that's very important. But I think from the employer perspective, I think I want to bring this back to what can employers do. You mentioned we have, through the BCIB, we've got the community benefit agreements and these opportunities for, in this example, women by having the expectation on the community benefit agreements that a certain percentage of those workers will be women. I want to encourage employers, though, not to wait, and a lot of them aren't, not to wait until there's an opportunity to community benefit agreement to fill a quota. This has to be a fundamental shift in this industry within your company, within this industry, to grow the participation through a lot of factors that we talked about here today and more, so that you're just that much more ready and more prepared, and perhaps less scared of the implications of bidding on a community benefit agreement project where you're expected to meet these, for lack of a better term, the quotas that the government or the BCIB has put in place. It needs to be a fundamental shift in the industry, period. Community benefit agreements is really just bringing to the forefront what should be mainstream already.
Thanks, Ken. And I see you, Brenda, wanting to jump back in. And
just for clarity, we don't have quotas on a BCIB project. We have a percentage, the contractor gets a percentage higher, the union gets a percentage higher, and BCIB gets a percentage higher. Our mandate is priority hiring for Indigenous people, women, LGBTQ, differently abled people. So we don't really have a target or per se. We're just trying to, work to be more inclusive of those who haven't been in the past. And I think for me is that, if we don't work together on this stuff, if we constantly fighting and trying to protect our turf and trying to undermine, something that we could use to make real change, then we're not going to make it. We're not going to do it. And that's really sad.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brenda. You more or less said out exactly what I was going to say. But I also want to chime in because I will say, I actually think quotas are needed because we're not getting there by not having quotas. And wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where we didn't even need to have a conversation about quotas or percentages or priority hiring or anything like that? I see our time is running out. There's lots of great questions. I wish we could get to all of them. There is a question, and maybe if folks, as we close out, this is a really important one, and because we're gonna just go around the room one last time real quick. And the question is around women. Often the first place they experience discrimination is like on the first day of trades training school in the systems. And so we know that is a direct impact on women. We hear the horrific, I'm sorry, but the stories that I've heard personally are horrific of what happens to women in their trades training schools. And I don't even want to talk about them because they make me so angry. So as we sort of as you contemplate your closeout, whether you want to talk about that a little bit or not, that's up to you. But it is a question I didn't want to close out on without acknowledging, because it's incredibly important. So how do we increase instructor knowledge, institutional knowledge, that type of stuff? For those of you in that industry, in that field, if you could maybe chime in a little bit on that one. And I am going to, where was I at on my list? I am going to go to Brynne.
Thanks, Sussanne. Well, I think I touched on it earlier, having women instructors. It is a total, very, very powerful tool, because the first sort of experience with the trade, your first interface is a woman who's teaching you. And that is powerful for, male apprentices, and it's powerful for female apprentices. So I'm mindful of the time. I'll leave that there. Thanks. It's been lovely being on this panel with everyone.
Thank you, Brynne. Ken, do you want to go, and then we'll go back to Guy, and then I'd like to finish off with Cindy and then Brenda. I'm going to go a little out of order.
I think we've touched on most of the points around this, and I'd mentioned earlier that it's my belief that the type of training, the equity, diversification, inclusive type training, or the be more than a bystander type training, should be part of the apprenticeship curriculum. It should be something that they are required. We can do everything we can to try and change existing work sites, but I think we're going to have an even greater chance of doing it by bringing this next generation of workers in with the proper mindset that doesn't even understand why this should be an issue or a concern. Man, woman, otherwise. You do the job, you do it well, and you get recognized and rewarded for it and hired for it. I look forward to the time, as I said before, the day when we're not even having to have this conversation anymore.
Thank you. Now, Guy, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, no, it's a great comment because in question, because let's remember where a lot of the instructors come from. They come from the culture of, in some cases, 30 years ago to 20 years ago, and as we know today, the culture still isn't quite there. So we do need to provide, you know, in the post-secondary system, like for all our students, we provide a variety of supports. But that's not enough, and we are in the process of you know, whether you call it understanding with our faculty and putting them through some of these courses as well. And they all, of course, we all take harassment, discrimination training, but it's not enough. It's not enough in this instance because it is pretty specific and easier to travel. So we are going through adjusting our culture in a number of ways around this topic, around safety on the work site, around a variety of things. And I will, at BCIT, we have done, you know, we have had cohorts of train the trainer, the 3-day sessions. So we're moving forward on that front, which again will be pretty specific to this issue. But
Yeah,
we need to modernize our workforce as well.
Cindy, over to you.
Thanks. I just leave you with a couple of comments. One of them is set targets, because that's the only way you can measure, right? See if they're working. Set quotas. I'm with you, Sussanne. Set quotas, they work. We remember affirmative action, all that, set them. And in taking what Brenda said about building relationships, absolutely build those relationships and educate, educate, educate.
Brenda, and I'd love to close this panel off with your words. So over to
Okay,
you.
well, I'm just going to say a teaching that Sussanne used to tell the students at BCIT, and well, the greatest distance a human being will ever travel is the distance from their head to their hearts. And it's only when we can speak heart to heart will we move forward together. Language.
Thank you, language. I won't say anything other than thank you to our panelists, to all of you out there watching. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure we'll continue to have it. And thanks all of you. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you on the Hoover site.
Thank you very much to all the panelists and to Sussanne for that amazing and insightful session. What I really like to do right now is to invite you all to be part of a networking reception. This is a unique feature of our Whova platform and allows each of you, our attendees, to be automatically sorted into video chats with 3 other conference participants. You'll have 10 minutes to introduce yourselves and your trade organization, then share what you're up to forward equity and inclusion in the skills trade. After the 10 minutes are up, you'll be automatically resorted into another group for 10 minutes, and then again, once more after that. When the half hour is up, you'll be connected with 9 other people who are also reaching for at least some of the same goals as you. To access the networking reception, please go to the conference agenda and select the networking reception interactive social session, which should be starting right now. And then we'll have a break after the networking reception, and I invite you to come back at about 11:20 for a fun video before the final panel for today. Thank you.